Okay, welcome to Cluster 3, Topic 2 and 3, revision series. So, for this particular revision series, we will be looking at Cluster 3 in terms of climate. Okay, so as usual, we will be working with the syllabus as well as some details and some proposed areas of focus, right, or common areas that has been difficult for candidates in the past. Okay, so under KQ1, what's the natural variability of climate? This has got to do with our idea about night and day, about the climatic zones, how the angle of tilt, how rotation and revolution around the sun creates a variation in terms of climatic situations. Alright, so generally in this area here, what we tend to see would be described graphical questions. Okay, stimulus led line graphs that show spread of temperature across multiple years, and then them asking you to put down what would be a trend that you see. So just one key thing to note, remember when you're doing a describe question for things that are maps, graphs, they actually expect an overall trend to be identified by you. Okay, whether it's increasing, decreasing, provide process data, the increase from how much to how much by how much. Okay, the by how much is your process data. That's very important. Okay, so keep that in mind. It could be also stimulus led, like a photograph like this, and then they ask you how change in orbit could lead to change in temperature. Okay, what are we looking out for in this particular area? Okay, rotation as well. Sometimes they can show you rotation due to the 24-hour rotation of the planet Earth, right? What happens and why is it that for large parts of, well, half the time you are experiencing cooler surface temperatures? Okay, that's got to do with the day and night. Then, of course, part 3 here deals with certain things like what are some of these natural processes that can actually affect climatic temperature change, right? So I just want to highlight that for the area of sunspots, right? If you look at the textbook itself, there isn't a definite identity of who is tracking this. Okay, so actually the 11-year cycle of rise and fall in terms of sunspot activity, right, is tracked by NASA. So remember, this is important. Similarly, if you're going to talk about large-scale volcanic eruptions, right, the 91 Pinatubo one is a very good one to remember, right? It drops about 0.6 degrees for 15 months. So I think this was quite significant in terms of an impact that is naturally occurring that led to a change in temperature. Okay. Of course, the other pair of factors that they like to test for will be your anthropogenic one versus the two natural ones we talked about earlier. So ideas of population, industrialization, what are the causes of greenhouse effect, right? Change of use, land use. These are all things that you can look at in terms of comparing against your natural factors. Which one is more serious? Okay, so OEQ, this is possible, possible. I wouldn't say it will come out. Nobody know what will come out, but it's possible. Okay, so it can come in these forms. So in terms of anthropogenic and more significant than natural factors, if you look at your friends from other schools in the papers, right, a lot of schools like to test this as well. Okay, so what we're looking at under your anthropogenic factors, you can look at deforestation, building of industries or urbanization, either one, but they are not very in detail and they're lumped together most of the time because your industries actually are a result of trying to support urbanization. Okay, you don't need industries if you're not trying to develop and become urban. If you're rural, everybody plants their own food and it's more or less self-sustaining to a much larger degree than if you live in an urban city. So in an urban city, this is why we would need industries to exist because they provide the ability, the resources for the urban dwellers so that they can go to work. They don't have to hunt for food, plant for vegetables, etc. Okay. Then the other thing is, of course, the rise of agriculture, commercial agriculture, and its impact on global warming and climate change. Right. So once again, natural factors you have your two. Okay. There's no one way to argue which is the best, which is the most damaging. But do remember, anthropogenic factors are ever increasing because human population is ever increasing. Okay, natural factors are very intense for the period of time that it happens. You may want to argue that volcanic eruptions happen quite regularly. in a year across the world, but the very large ones don't actually uh, have high frequency. Okay, otherwise we'll be covered in soot all the time. Right, here within the syllabus itself, right, what can they test? They can test within or across the area of impact. So in your notes, right, there's this box that's empty. So you may want to fill this in into your notes later on, right? So what we're looking at is they can ask whether A is more important than B, or the effects of the factors under classification 1 is more significant compared to the effects on classification 2 and 3. Okay, now how are you going to deal with it? If it's across impacts, right, on natural is more serious than aquatic or terrestrial, you need one from each, one factor from each. Okay, if you're lucky, they tell you between increase in ocean surface temperature and increase in atmospheric temperature and changes in precipitation on land, which is more impactful as on natural systems, then you have to cover both of them, right? So it really depends on what they test. For part 4, right, once again, it can be across these three, it can be within each of these factors, because each has a pair, so it could be a more serious one. So if they tell you direct impacts are more serious than indirect impacts of climate change on human systems, you have to look at this area, think about what are the direct impacts and what are the indirect impacts. Okay, right. So once again, it's a more component here. So technically, it cannot fault you if you pick one direct impact, either 2A or 2B, and you put it against an indirect impact, either 3A or 3B, right? And then you conclude with one being agree or disagree lah. Okay, agree or disagree with the statement. All right. Now, for something like this, how are we going to evaluate properly? Okay. Always remember the three main things that we talk about in common criterias. Look at cost, either cost to prevent, cost to recover. Look at the scale of impact. Is it a large area? Is it a small area? Are you impacting a lot of people? Are you impacting a very small group of people? Okay. In this case here, the scale impact and the cost, or you can look at the amount of people. Right. These are all possible common criteria that you can use in the attempt to answer this OEQ question here. Okay, so that was topic 2, the final bit of topic 2 that I wanted to cover. And then we move on to topic 3. Okay, topic 3.